My buddy Mark Smith comes into town. I'm never going to pass up an opportunity to come hang out, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me up.
Thanks a lot, man. It's always cool to sit down with you, so appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. This one's kind of been on the calendar for a while. We've talked a few times in the last couple of months about a lot of the things you've been doing. I know you've been coming up here pretty regularly. This has become a pretty regular trip for you to come to the San Francisco Bay Area.
Quite ironic, right? Like, of all the places.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, like, so I don't know. Like, I never, when I fantasized about what might happen when I started this, like, number one, like, none of it involved leaving the Carolinas, for one, much less coming over here at all, much less than that, coming over here regularly. You know what I mean? And so, like, out of all the, it's almost like being buddies with my friend Bill Blowers, right? Very uncanny relationship. Like, it doesn't make sense when you look at it on paper. Like, he's 20 years my senior, opposite side of the country, like, totally different background. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's the same kind of thing with this, right? It's just very, uncanny is a good word. Like, you wouldn't expect it. Or I wouldn't anyway.
Well, isn't that an interesting thing about this whole, like, space in this industry?
Yeah.
That you get connected with folks like it. This is a perfect example of that. I had the opportunity to train with you. Let me back up a little bit. I think one of the interesting, maybe more interesting things about how I got introduced to you offline, because I didn't know you, we didn't know one another before I knew who you were and knew what you were doing, but is that I got to sit next to you or stand next to you and train next to you. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But so I got to see you solve problems and, on the range and work through your process before I actually took a course with you and kind of then got the full experience with regard to the training. But that said, at that event, that was with our buddy Mike Olivella with Precore and Fred Baker with Counting Coup down in Georgia. The point of that being there was a lot of characters there that I would not have probably ever had any contact with.
Yeah, agreed.
Outside of, what you do in the digital or social media space without this industry. And if you want to have those experiences or have those interactions, this will allow you to do that.
Yeah, dude, then the networking piece of this industry especially is so important, man. Like, because there's so much out there that everybody, like, can benefit from if we do it the right way, but you'll never know unless, like, like some people hate SHOT Show, some people love SHOT Show. I'm a very people person. Is that, like, I love SHOT Show, dude. Like, I get to see all these people that I've known forever that I've never actually met in person. I get to see people that I hadn't seen in a year. I get to see people that I hadn't seen in a couple months. Like, I get to go hang out with my friends, man. And meet new friends. And so, like, stuff like that has always been the opening of the door for me to take one more room in this, you know what I mean? And just keep kind of moving through this industry and meeting people and getting to do cool stuff with cool guys that I otherwise would have never even known about.
That actually cues up a lot of what I wanted to talk about, actually, just with the networking, the people that you train with. I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but just without beating this up too much, I think that is the opportunity those are the opportunities that this stuff presents a person with if they want to take advantage of it. Certainly, if you want to sit on your home range at home with your buddies or just on your own and try to absorb it that way and have kind of those relationships from a distance and gather information and extract value from the people that are trying to provide it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I found is there's so much value and power in just putting yourself out there in these situations where you said the word rooms. Like, and getting in the room with just people that know so much more or have done so many different things or just coming at it from such a different angle. And again, that's kind of how I wound up here, which, sometimes I pinch myself and might sound a little corny. Like, how did I get in this room?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I just go, wow, like this, like, look at kind of how this thing has evolved. And it really is just about those touch points.
Yeah.
And talking to good dudes and being okay with being uncomfortable and just wanting to know more.
Dude, I constantly feel like one day the veil's going to be torn and everybody's going to find out that I'm just a normal dude.
You're just a dude.
You know what I mean? And then the game's going to be up. That's it. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't even know I don't even know how this happened, man. You know, like I never planned on this being what it is. Not because, you know, I don't want it to be or anything, you know, weird like that. But I don't know, man. I've never seen myself as anybody special at all, man. Like I come from one red light town in Appalachian. Like who am I for these dudes of all the people and all the choices to want anything to do with what I'm talking about, you know? And it's, but the more you start to kind of branch out and get in touch with a lot of these different dudes and these ideas and get personal with them, right? So like talking to Mike offline on the porch in a dark corner, just talk. Like I think all the dudes that are doing this stuff for the right reasons, like we kind of all feel that way.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like I think there's a line that exists somewhere where, you might call it the Dunning-Kruger effect or whatever you want to call it, but there's somewhere in there in your experience that you get this sense of maturity that you didn't used to have, that you recognize how much there is potentially out here, and you don't feel any kind of way about being like, I am certain I don't know it all, man. Like I don't, and I'm not sorry, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm certain I don't know it all. You know what I mean? And yeah, so it's wild, man. It's a super wild ride.
I think that is why, well, I know actually, I don't have to be convinced of this at all, and I'm not going to try to convince myself that I'm right, because I know I'm right, that the reason you keep getting invited back to these places, or the reason that you have been as successful as you are, and that might sound weird.
It's kind of weird
to hear that, but is because of what you just said there, and that is, you know, you're just a dude who really cares about what he's doing and cares about people. And I've said this publicly on lots of podcasts with other people, in that what I found about you, and I think people get this, and it may not sit well with them at the same time, but they get it, and that is that Mark genuinely cares about every single person in his class, and he wants to make a connection with them. And I also think, and it's not that you're the only person that does this, but I think what you do is, what you have done really well is, you do have a very solid relationship with a very specific audience. And you know those people, like you have your finger on the pulse of what it is, of who they are and what it is that they need. And it comes out, whether it's natural for you or you've had to work. It's
extremely natural, dude.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So where does that come from?
I don't know. Like I have never, like the hardest part about what I do for a living is the admin crap, right? when the day starts, like it's totally flow. Like it's not, I don't even think about it. I just go, right? And that's what's so weird, is that I don't feel like, you know, obviously, like I definitely work hard by way of, I'm not stagnant. I'll never be stagnant. I will consistently attempt to move the needle on my own stuff, to attempt to gain new ideas and new concepts, to be able to have an ever-changing, growing, and consistently evolving product for the better, right? I tell dudes all the time, man, like you look the same for 10 years because you always do the same thing for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, and then, you know, it's not toot my own horn, man, but like my full intention is Mark Smith will get better and better and better and better until the day my body defies me, right? Or I die, until I can't do it anymore. I'm going to keep doing it. And it's not because of some weird thing like always be ready, brother, or anything weird like that. It's because this stuff just fascinates me, man. Like the shooting, like the concept of shooting and how simple it is in just nature, right? It's so wild how easy it's not. You know what I mean? Like, it's the constant pursuit of perfection that you know you'll never achieve, right? And so, like, that's fascinating. So because of that, I just really love talking about it and messing with that idea and exploring that idea, and like understanding that I know exactly what I need to do, but I can't do it perfectly. You know what I mean? And so, or at least not perfectly all the time.
Every time, yeah.
And so anyway, like because of that, I think it's just, I don't know, man. Like I always feel like I'm just having a conversation with you. Like the only thing that changes between like what me and anybody else talks about at a bar or at a living room table is that I have to talk louder because there's more dudes listening. Like, but it still just feels like a conversation of like, let's just talk about this stuff, man. Like what do you think? Right? Like I'm constantly asking dudes, like if like I don't know all there is to know about shooting, man, or everything there is to know. So like if you got ideas or challenges or questions, like let's talk about this stuff, dude. Like in a lot of things that I think, and I don't think that like other instructors don't say this because they don't think it. I think maybe they just don't feel as strongly about it as I do. Like I come from a place, a childhood, a home where like honor and integrity is prized above all else. And so like when you hire me, like when you sign up for a class, you are hiring me. You are the boss, right? Now I'm running the range, but I'm working for you, man. So work me, right? Like ask. You know what I mean? Don't just come here and just show up and just sit here the whole time. Like work me, you know? And I openly invite that, dude, because like I've had some really neat conversations come out of somebody being like, hey, man, you know, I always tell dudes, like I always invite and encourage friendly challenges, right? Like, hey, Mark, I've always been taught X, right? And X works for me. You are promoting Y, which is in direct conflict to X. What do you think about that? Like, dude, let's talk about that, right? Like, I love that crap.
So that I'm going to cut you off here because there's a couple of things that come up for me and have come up for me in my experiences with you, but and some of that is in person, like we're doing now, because we podcasted before in the past, about a year and a half ago. So,
God, has it been that long?
It's been that long. Wow. I did the math today. I was like, man, it's been like bizarre. April 23, I think or March 23 is when I saw you, and we're recording this in, September of 24, and so much has happened. And what I watched is not only are you having that conversation with other people, like on the range when they're maybe they are or they aren't asking you. And I'm gonna want to talk about a couple different populations and how that interaction goes. But I'm kind of watching, like what I see you do things on social media or even like in your own podcast and podcasts I've listened to that you've been on or so that other people have hosted you on. And that is that exploratory process and that questioning, that question asking, you're doing that of yourself constantly. And to you, you're just going, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Like, and to you, that's a very simple process. But for others, that's very not natural for them to do. They are waiting for the answer and then taking that answer and trying to make that work, that whatever answer they got, make that answer work for them in whatever way they took that answer in. And what's different, going back to like you saying, look, I'm working for you, make me work. What you do is you ask the third question and the fourth question to make sure that people are understanding what you're telling them and the why behind it, and asking them to explore that in their own head. And you're providing some context of how it goes through your head. And for a lot of people, that might be very uncomfortable. So going back to these other populations, there's a couple, you're here this week training law enforcement specifically. And my experience with that is they come from an institution. And what's interesting about that institution is it's not the same anywhere. But what is very similar is that they are told very specifically how to do something, to the extent that they're almost taught not to think. This is the way we do this. Do it this way. This is the answer. And then there's another population of people, and that might be the civilian or the person that maybe at one point went through the military or something like that, who was taught just like that, the same way, or has very little experience. They were taught by someone, their dad, their brother, whatever else, and they were just given this information, but they weren't ever in an environment where they could take it in from different places. So the question in all this is I wonder, does that change for you when you're in front of law enforcement? And if so, how? Versus when you're standing in front of maybe more of a group of civilians?
Does what change?
Sorry, the way you present or have to get them to ask themselves the question.
It's weird because it's not necessarily like it is intentional. I purposefully do it, but I don't like plan it that way. Like I don't sit here and say, okay, I got to teach like the law enforcement class. Like it's not like that. Like I don't have a cop class and a regular dude class, right? It's all the same stuff. What changes is the context of application and possibly how you're thinking about this based on your own, like the biggest like issue that I've found in the training industry specifically is that everybody only has their own experience and their own scope of reference. It's very hard to see the world through somebody else's eyes, right? And as we know, the context of application with shooting is wide and varied depending on what you're doing with it, right? And so possibly, depending on that context of application, some of this stuff might be very similar when you look at it, but very different when you're thinking about like the mental side of what this dude's doing right now. So like, for instance, cops, like ones at a higher level, are oftentimes looking at, let's just say, data collection. So I want to see what my draw to first shot time is. They're looking at that and approaching that from a point of missing is not an option. So when you take that and you compare it against somebody like a dude that's trying to get out of B class to go to A class in USPSA, he's looking at it as A's are preferred, but Charlies are good enough.
They're okay.
Right? And so now both of these dudes end up on the internet, and one of them's like 1 second is the standard. And the other dude ends up going, well, dude, there's no way I can do that. But are you doing it the same way, man? You know what I mean? Or is there a disparity in the mental state of how you're collecting this data, right? And so I think one of the character traits that I have, and I think it's just organic, it's God-given, right, is I have a pretty good ability to look deeper into the context and like the whole picture of what we're doing here than a lot of people do. I feel like a lot of people are very surface level in their thoughts, right? They don't think through the entire thing that's happening here, right? A great example is, some dudes, when they reload the pistol, they like to reload it and they like to slingshot the slide, right? Rip it off the back of the gun, go back to the, so what I do when I talk about reloading a pistol is we're going to have a talk about reloads. However, it is a talk about what are you doing and have you thought through all the processes of why are you doing it? Or are you just doing it because that's what you were told to do?
This is my point. Yep.
And so like for like slide lock reloads, why are you doing that? And you hear all, and I'm not saying it's wrong, right? I got tons of context in which it's the best way to do this, right? But a lot of dudes are planning to do this and the context is just flawed, right? Based on the fact that they've never thought all the way through this. And one of the biggest examples I get is like, oh, well, it's the battlefield pickup, right? Like I pick the pistol up and I don't know how it works. The slingshot to reload the gun will work with any modern semi-automatic pistol. Okay, is that a true statement? Yes, that is a true statement, right? But if you look deeper into this fantasy that you're planning, right? Okay, cool. So that's a true statement that will work. Next question I've got is, where are you getting all these magazines you're now bestooned with to do these speed reloads with this pistol? You don't even know how to work. You just picked up, man, right? And so then dudes are like, oh, well, I never, you know what I mean? And like, that's a lot. Like, that's, I don't want to say it's 90%. That's a large portion of what I bring to the table, is trying to help dudes think through, like, what are you doing, and does it actually make sense, man?
Yeah,
or have we just been doing this because that's just what we've been doing? You know what I mean? And then you also have to look at, well, this works. Okay, got it. But in what environments has it been tested in? Right? Because there's all kinds of things that work unopposed. There's all kinds of things that work when it ain't raining. There's all kinds of things that work when you ain't wearing a puffy coat and you got on the slick, tight Under Armour t-shirt with wet armpits. You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds. So have you went like in all of the environments? Does it work, or only the context that you have intrinsically biased does it work?
Right? And the one that you train in all the time.
And if the answer is I ain't sure, then for the love of God, man, you got to be willing to test this stuff, man, and try this out, right? Because best made plans being what they are, sometimes bad things happen to good people, dude, and just don't go like you thought it was going to go. So have you tested in that environment? You know what I mean? Standards. The word standards comes to mind, right? Like a lot of dudes are like, the draw to first shot is the standard is 1 second. Okay, so head box partial at 20 yards? Oh, no. Wait, okay, so when is it the standard then? Well, 7 yards in. Okay, cool. In the puffy coat under knots? Oh, well, no. Okay, all right, what about from concealment, appendix carry in the rain parka? Oh, well, no, not that. Okay, so like standard to me means always. It is the standard. Right? And so I think what a lot of dudes are doing is they're going out to the range and they're training, they're testing, and their culture is biasing them in a way where they haven't thought outside of their own scope of reference, right? And I think that's important, man. Like we need to start thinking about some of that stuff,
I agree. It's their own scope, but it's also the one person they take their information from versus getting information from a lot of different people and biasing themselves towards that.
And they don't realize they're doing that.
Very much true. I think that's very true. And it's not an on purpose thing. It's the lack of digging again to that next layer of like, well, when might not this work? Or when does this not a good idea? And so part of this is, I think I alluded to this when we first started, or maybe I did this before we even hit record, but you go out and train with a lot of different people. Again, I just described, my first interaction with you is you were training with somebody else. You go out there and not only are you training with other industry pros, but you're also competing on a regular basis.
As best I can, for sure.
And I think that's an important thing to note here. If with as much as you're working and as much as you're training, there's time for competition, but it's not something you can be doing every single weekend. That's just the way it is, and I think that's a tough thing for some people to understand, but I don't know why.
Dude, there's nothing I would love more than to compete like all the time.
That's the other part of it.
I love that crap.
But you're not getting paid. I mean, how many professional shooters are there in the world that actually make a living shooting?
I don't know any of them personally, right? I'm certain there are a handful, maybe more than a handful. I bet you, though, that you couldn't fit them all in a school bus, or you could fit them all in a school bus, right? Like there's not many of them, man, that just get paid to just shoot nothing else, right? Even the ones that do get paid to shoot matches, they also are obligated to the brand deals they've agreed to. They're obligated to the content they've agreed to make for like there's other stuff they've agreed to other than just shoot the gun. You know what I mean? So I don't know that anybody is just doing that. So
there are professionals out there that you call them professionals that make a living with a gun on their hip, right? Or stuck in their pants or slung around their neck or whatever the case is. But they're not being paid for that. They're being paid for the other things that come along with it, and the gun is part of the job. It comes with the territory. My point of bringing that up is that I see you out there training with lots of different people constantly. And bottom line is you're training all the time. But when I say training, I mean you're practicing. You're practicing what you've learned, and you're also practicing what you're discovering. It's not, I'm trying to do the same thing all the time. And then what I also see you do a really good job with is sharing that, what you're learning along the way and what has been working best for you. And you're sharing that in a way that doesn't, you're not directing as this is the way to do it. This is the way that I'm doing it, or that I've learned to do it. And maybe this makes sense for you. Maybe it doesn't. But here's what I want you to think about if you're going to try it. And if you're not going to try it, that's cool. But maybe when you're doing your own thing, maybe think about it a little differently. That kind of thought process, I've actually found is pretty rare. And that's kind of what led me into the podcasting realm, was like, because my brain thinks, I think a lot, very, very similar to yours. And in the sense that, like, I love being a student. And I love the pursuit of like learning what other people do to be successful at the thing that they're doing, whether that's business, whether it's shootings, health, fitness, life, relationships, whatever else it is. It doesn't mean I'm going to adopt the exact same thing. It means I want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. So maybe I can apply that. Maybe I can't. I don't know. But I know damn sure I'm open to listening and learning about it.
One of the things I used to chat behind in a little bit, right, was I go to, so there's two sides of this. I used to go to classes, and the coach would be like, now listen, y'all, this ain't the way, it's just a way. And I was always sitting there thinking, all right, man, well, then tell me all
what are the other ways,
right? Like, because maybe this way ain't my way. You know what I mean? Like, the implication is you have found all of these different ways and discerned that this is your way. Therefore, I should probably do the same thing. So, what are the other ways, right? But then the flip side of that coin is, out of all of the places you could have been this weekend, you have paid money to be here. Therefore, I'm under the assumption, at least, that you would like to know how I do
my way.
You know what I mean? And so I try to cover all that as best I can, as efficiently as I can, given the time that we got to do all this stuff, because there's so much stuff to cover, dude, that you kind of have to pick through, like, what's, priorities of work, man. Like, what's most important? If you only took one thing away from this, what would be the most important? Then next, and try to fill those gaps in. But it's fascinating, man. Like how, like, like pistol grip is a great topic for this, right? Like, pistol grip is wide and varied depending on who you ask, man. And you can ask 10 different great, like champion level shooters, and they're all going to answer you somewhat very similar and somewhat very different all at the same time, right? Like everybody has their different conception of how they're doing this, right? And so I think to tell a dude to stand in front of a crowd of people and say, you must do this my way or you're wrong, I believe is the height of ego and arrogance, right? Like that is not what I'll ever say. I'll say, hey man, at one time I tried this, and with this pistol, based on the fact I had some issues with my left wrist, this worked pretty good. Try this crap out, right? See what's going on. We all got different hand sizes, strengths, injuries, guns, like all these different variables come into play. And if all you ever tell somebody is, oh, your recoil sucks, grip harder, well, what's my wife supposed to do, man? Like she just can't shoot a gun, I guess? You know what I mean?
That's really
or are there other ways to do this? And so, like, I've always kind of, not always, in the past couple of years, I've started to look at, okay, let's not just look at how I'm doing something. Let's look at why I am doing that. Like, what am I trying to do when I do that so that you can play around with all this stuff and have a definition of success that discerns when you've arrived, right? And it ain't just trying to look like me. It's understanding what am I trying, like, again, grip is a great example, or mounting the gun with the rifle. So I want to manage recoil. What does that mean?
What does that even mean? Yep.
What does that mean? Like, and I think a lot of dudes, like for instance, they conceptualize that means making the gun flat and unmoving. Well, dude, I've seen a whole lot of people that shoot a real flat gun that miss all over the place, right? So that objective data indicates that's not the answer. So and I've seen like Lena Michalek. That is a woman that will tune your hind end up, dude, and her gun's bucking like a Bronco a whole lot of times, right, compared to what most dudes can do. So obviously, making the gun not move is not the answer. So what are we doing, right? And trying to give dudes principles and ideas that they need to be paying attention to. Of if we could do this, this, and this, would you agree this would be good? Yes. Okay. Cool. Then
how do we get
pay
there?
Attention to that, right? And see what you can do to accomplish that. And so I think that this is the way you should do it. Like that law you attributed it to the law enforcement industry and things like that. Like, this is the way we do it. Don't ask no questions. Like, I think, and I'm glad that it's happening. I think that's becoming a little antiquated.
I think
right?
it is
like
too.
People are moving away from that, and they're starting to look at like, dude, I don't know, dude. There's a whole lot of different ways to do this, and I'm interested in quite a few of them because what we are doing is keeping us here, and everybody else is leaving us, man. You know, and sometimes that's what it takes.
So the next thing I want to jump into then is why that is happening. When the what being this acceptance of, look, there must be a better way, because I think now people are seeing it. Like, and I think social media has a lot to do with that. And I don't want to make this a social media conversation. It's just more visible to people. Yeah. Things like competitive shooting, practical shooting. It's becoming people are starting to recognize it as this has some value. That practical shooting will get you killed in the streets thing that's going away. There's a large crowd that's still holding on to that. But let's talk about that. This acceptance of there's more to be learned out there. I'm recognizing that as an officer or as a department or as an agency, and it's okay. And not only is it okay, it's necessary. That we go out and we explore these things and we bring folks like you in to train this stuff. And so going back to the practical shooting piece, I wonder what your thoughts are on kind of what you're seeing going on right now in the industry at large, but specifically with law enforcement as it relates to practical shooting.
Number one, man, I'm sure I don't know how trends start. Like I don't know what starts that, right? But what I constantly see and hear and hear, you know, testified is cops as a general culture, right? Like, who do cops love to hang out with more than anybody else? Right?
Cops,
freaking
right?
Cops, man. Like they're not. It's not that we're not friends. It's not that we're not, you know, cordial. It's not that we're not homeboys. It's nothing like that. But those aren't my people, man. My people are normal dudes, right? Cops are their own culture, and I think what is happening is that, like, they didn't want to listen to me, but when half the people in the department go to this this class by this practical shooter that showed up or whatever, and they come back and they're like, dude, that was crazy, right? When enough people start talking like that, everybody becomes curious, right? And then when enough people take the plunge into that, it becomes like it's okay to cross that threshold now. Like my homeboy, it's almost like peer pressure almost, right?
Yep.
Like my homeboys are doing it. Okay, so this is the cool thing now. And I think a whole lot of dudes are just doing it, frankly, because that's what their mates are doing. I don't think they like, until they go and they experience it, I don't think they think it's going to be a whole lot that it becomes, right? My buddy Grant Yunt comes to mind from Colorado. He was actually on my podcast, and he's a great example, man. He's I can't remember exactly what he said that led him to be doing this, but another cop that was a buddy of his, he had reached out to some cop buddies, and he was like, "Hey, man, what's some good classes? This, that, and the other." And they recommended Riley Bowman and me that were coming to town. And he said, "Man, I signed up for your course." And he said, "And frankly, I did not expect much, And he said, "And then you told us that we were going to be doing bill drills at 25 yards. And I remember thinking, who is this freak, man? Like, we don't do bill drills at 25 yards. Like, that's a 7-yard drill. Like, what are you talking about?"
This goes right back to where we started with this conversation.
And then you did it in like 3 seconds clean. And he said, and that was like the first time I ever realized what was possible. Like, I had never seen anything like that before. Like he said, my brain didn't even fathom that was a thing. You know what I mean? And so that, like, when that occurs, that's where the fire starts, right? And like now, like that dude, like he's changing he's the training coordinator for his department. He's changing everything. You know what I mean? And I think it's because, like, it's very hard to argue, man, that maximum points and minimum time is the way. Like, that's a hard argument if you're going to stand against it. You know what I mean? Like, you better have some really, really good data to stand in front of, I'm going to shoot more accurately and more faster than you can, and somehow you're going to come out on top. Like, explain that to me.
That's a tough argument.
Right. And so I think that, as human nature is, people want to belong more than anything else, right? And the last thing you want to do is be the copper in the department that's holding on to antiquated stuff, right? Like, you're going to just assimilate eventually, right? But I think, like, normally that's perceived as a negative thing or a bad thing, but in this case, it actually is a very good thing, right? The dudes that are the leaders in these departments, right? I think of like Ollie from San Francisco, like they are leading these men down these roads, and they're following them because they have found an experience with these men that what they say is typically good. So I'm going to go. Right. And then they're seeing it. And then they tell people, right? It's kind of like this tree of conversation that occurs where people start hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it. And finally, everybody's like, I want to go see what the heck this is all about, man. And then just like me and very likely you, I've never talked to you about it, but like most people I know that shoot pretty well, at some point your eyes were open to what was possible that you didn't realize, right? And that's where either you have a choice to make. You can either hold on to what you've always done and self-justify it somehow.
Be comfortable.
Or it's time to get better, man. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely a trend going that way. It's becoming I don't know if like trendy is the right. I don't know if trend is the right word. It's almost more of it for me is like an evolution. And so when I look at kind of when I stepped into this whole world of trying to understand it all first and then try to put all the pieces together, there was a lot of argument about the competition thing, and it was very new. And now every city you go to not every, I got to drive several cities over if I want to get into a competition or whatever. It's not as accessible, but the point of this is you can go kind of anywhere in the country, and there's going to be something near you if you want to go do it. And I'm not so sure that didn't exist before. It's just now people are more aware of it. And to your point, going back to you mentioned Ali, there's a champion kind of everywhere that's pushing this in some level. Not everybody's listening to them, and not everybody wants to be a part of it, and that's fine. But the point of that being is there's always there's one dude, right? There's one human that's kind of driving it, and then you get 2, and then you get 3, and kind of think what you're seeing, going back to the trend of the evolution, is like this critical mass of people wanting to be part of the cool crowd maybe, but also recognizing that the cool crowd is better at this stuff than they are, and that holding on to those convictions, whatever they are, that level of comfort is holding them back, and that they're going to get left behind and they're not going to be part of the cool crowd if they don't at least give it a try.
So I had a conversation with my best friend Bill Blowers one time about something similar. His question was essentially, why? Like, explain to me, why do I need competition to be the best shooter I can be? Right? And I think
Great question.
That's interesting.
Great question.
Because that's what a lot of people are saying. You got to go compete or you suck at shooting, right?
That's a hard argument to make too.
You know what I mean? Because Blowers doesn't compete on a regular basis, but he's pretty freaking squared away. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, it gives you the opportunity to have, an environment set up that's not biased to your strengths, that you don't control. And he's like, okay, cool. So I can have some dudes from the team come in and set some random stuff up. And I was like, oh, okay. It gives you a consistency evaluation of not just the one thing, but how well you are most of the time compared to everybody else over the course of multiple things.
Okay.
Right. And he's like, all right, cool. So we'll do it a couple times then. And I was like, dang, all right. And basically, without going through the whole, rigmarole of what we went through, here's what I arrived at, man. I have not yet found the environment that produces for me the same type and the same level of pressure that I feel when I go somewhere where I don't know these people, I don't know what they're going to ask me to do, and I know that because of who I am, and the vast majority of the time somebody knows me, there's an expectation that comes with my presence, right? And that's hard to manage, man, right? And I actually have talked to Pranka about this a lot, and he has attested that match pressure is significantly greater than a real gunfight. Right. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, dude. Cause like in the fight, I got my boys with me, dude. Like, I know it's going to be fine. Everything's cool. Right. But like when you step into the box, you're on your own, dude. And everybody's watching. Right. And like, I don't know how to replicate that in any other fashion. Right. Doing demos in front of classes, it's a pressure. Right. But I don't want to say it's not close. It's almost just a different type of pressure.
Well, you know what you're trying to do.
Right. And I also know that I can do it. Right. It's just a pressure of like, all right, don't dick this up. Right. Don't try to impress anybody, or just do it. Right. It's that kind of thing. But like at the match, like I'm constantly struggling to maintain a mental focus on a conscious occupation and stay in the 90% application realm, like stay in the 90% throttle realm, right? Because I know going to 100 don't work, but everything in me wants to go to 100, right? And so I like that. That is something that I never feel like I have to manage to the extent that I do at a match.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? And in my opinion, like matches are the best way to go shake down your gear, right? And make sure your crap ain't falling off of you and doing weird stuff. And I haven't felt that kind of pressure in the shoot house with human adversaries and force-on-force simulations training. I haven't felt that kind of pressure in front of really, really cool dudes in cool places. Like I haven't found, I've been in multiple violent altercations years ago. I haven't felt that kind of pressure. Like it's very different. And I don't know how else you can get it. And I think that's the biggest benefit of that, is that you will get a true unbiased assessment of what you can expect on the day when it goes the worst it can go. Like, and that's what I always feel about my match shooting is very often it's not the best I can do every time, right? Like problems happen and you have to work through them, right? And things like that. And so you get a pretty good assessment of what like the worst it can be. If you think about it that way, right? Like you dick up a reload, you drop a magazine over here, you slip, trip, fall, like all this stuff, but you still did all that better than most of the time, right? Or you did really, really terrible, right? And you kind of get a look at that and realize like, okay, here's where I stand against 100 randos that showed up to this thing, and 20 of them are pretty good. You know what I mean? And you get an idea of like, okay, what my training I've been doing is either working, or I got to burn the house down and rebuild it, man. This ain't working.
Yeah, so that's the part that I think that first off, I thought that's a great explanation and a really good answer for a lot of reasons that we don't need to rehash. But if you're not doing that in some way, you're not forced to look at yourself in the mirror in that kind of a way either, in that, wow, I think I'm better than this, or I should have done better than this. Here's where I messed up, versus going out to the range by yourself or going out to the range with, in Bill Blauer's case, like he gets his buddies to set up a couple of random stages wherever they go out and they practice that. Walking away from that with your buddies who maybe you're better than most of, if not all.
You already know when you show up who's going to win,
That's
dude.
my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. Versus having to step away going, fuck, I dicked that up. Like, what was it that I dicked up?
Yeah.
And what can I do now to be better at that? Yeah. And be forced to look at it rather than, it's fine.
I call it the Ricky Bobby experience, man. Remember when he's in that doggone car, right? And he's blindfolded and he's like, I'm going to drive this car, right? And he takes on and he just wrecks into everything and he gets done and he's like, I'm so embarrassed. I really thought I could feel it. You know what I mean? Like a lot of dudes get done. They're like, dude, I really thought I was doing good.
I thought I could do this.
Yeah. And it's a lot like that. So.
Yeah. I've done it a few times, competed a few times, and man, like it's the full Ricky Bobby. Like you just, you get back and you're like, fuck, I suck at this.
I blacked out.
Yeah. Like what do I do with my hands?
Another thing that it does that, I don't really know how else you could do, like creating a competitive environment, a competitive culture will naturally, organically breed excellence, right? So there's something cool, man, about seeing your name. Like the first match you ever go to, 100 dudes are there, you got 58th, right? Well, that stings a little bit, right? You really thought you were better than that, you know? All right, cool. So instead of abandoning it, stick with it and keep pushing. And next time you go, you get to 51st, right? Okay, cool. And then you see 45th and then 32nd. And eventually you start to get this fire in you about like, dude, I wonder if I could go to the top. You know what I mean? And you keep pushing. I actually had some dudes I was talking about this with. I actually think it was here. I always thought like a really cool, like a lot of teams or a lot of departments are setting up designated marksman programs, right? Or DMs, right? But that's not necessarily a classically known thing within law enforcement, right? And so they're not real sure, like, how do we create a training regimen for this, a gear list, a qual, like what do we do? And so I've been talking to a lot of different departments about this, and you know, full disclosure, man, I don't know dick all about the politics and the stuff that goes on inside of law enforcement, right? So I don't know how you would actually do this, but what would be awesome, I think, say you got, 200 coppers in a department. 10 of them are going to be DMs. We're going to designate 10. How do you pick those 10 dudes? Well, I got a pretty good idea. Why don't you have a match, right? And see who the top 10 are. And whoever the top 10 are at this match are now our current DMs. If you would like to be a designated marksman, you got to knock a man off the board.
You got to earn your
right?
win, yeah.
And so now what you get is you get the dudes that are on the board that must keep climbing in their skill set because these hungry dudes back here are coming for them, right? And everybody's going to, like rising tides, dude, rise all ships. You know what I mean? But there has to be a culture of I give a damn as well, right? Because like a lot of dudes go to matches, and I'm not clowning those dudes, right? They go to matches and they already know when they get out of the car, they're in no danger of winning anything. You know what I mean? And so they just don't, like, they just go the same way you and I would go to play golf on the weekend. Like we know we ain't going to the Masters, dude. You know what I mean? And we honestly just don't really care either way, And so we just want to go hit the balls, right? And I think a whole lot of dudes are going to matches like that. And if you force coppers that have that same kind of idea to go and compete in some sort of like arbitrary qual you've come up with, a lot of them, just like the PT test, they're just going to show up because that's what we're doing today. They don't care. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock at cops. Like before those dudes were cops, they were normal dudes. This is a culture problem, not a cop problem, right? We've bred mediocrity into this culture, and now we're selecting police from them, and we're saying, oh, the police suck. No, bitch, we suck. You know what I mean? Like we did this, So anyway, I get off my soapbox on that shit. But we can't hold a certain group to a higher standard that we won't hold our own culture to. You know what I mean? Like that's like talk about throwing rocks in glass houses, man.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
One of the things I hate worse than anything is when people are like, "Oh, cops suck at shooting." Oh, cops suck at shooting. Well, okay, compared to who, man?
To what?
Right? Like compared to USPSA shooters, I agree, right? But compared to the average American gun owner, they're actually pretty good, right? That's why they win a lot. You know what I mean? And then also consider like, do all people that are badge carrying need to be really great at shooting, right?
That's a great point.
Like if you show up to, if my daughter gets raped, right? I give a damn how good the rape detective shoots a gun, man. I need you to be good at clues and stuff. You know what I mean? When it's time to serve the warrant on that piece of trash, I need them dudes to be good at the shoot.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like that's unfair to say that. You know what I mean? And then also like the vast majority of dudes that say that, on what pedestal of authority and skill do you stand, sir? Mm-hmm. Right? Like you suck at shooting, man. Right? Well, yeah, but I'm not called to do it. Well, you damn sure shove a gun in your pants and walk in Walmart with my family. What do you mean you're not responsible for that? You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. Like, compete with you. Like it's bizarre to me. It's bewildering to me. Like you talked earlier about like how I always want to like try to do what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. Like again, it's based on an honor and an integrity sense that was put into me. I don't ever want to steal nobody's money, man. Right? And so like I feel obligated to continuously pursue information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and skill set so that I can earn what you have given me instead of just showing up because you saw my name on the internet and some dude said he liked the class, man. That ain't good enough for me.
You can't train that into somebody, man. That has to be there already.
And I don't know how to take that idea and put it into the culture, right? Put it into the general mindset, unless I can get dudes in front of me for a couple days, right? And pull at their heartstrings a little bit on certain things. And if there's an ember in there somewhere, man, maybe I can blow on that ember and get a flame lit again, right? But if you're cold and there ain't no smoke coming off that thing, I don't know what I can do for you, man.
Yeah, I think the ember piece is going, and I mentioned this before, a few steps further than just go harder, just grip the gun harder.
Yeah.
It's being able to walk somebody through the process.
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think instruction, and we're seeing a lot of folks do this really well right now, is figuring out how to do that better. And that takes time. It takes practice and being able to get inside somebody's head and not make it awkward. And sometimes it is awkward for them or you, but being okay going there to get through that process together, so to speak, on that journey, because every class I've ever taken, it's been a journey for me. Mm-hmm. And some of those have been very short-lived. Like right away, I knew this journey is over for the rest of this class. We are just doing what we're doing, mm-hmm. and we're going to get through the 350 rounds they said that we needed to bring to this class to get through this class.
Another really interesting thing that's happened as I have been doing this for a while now, right? Like the first year I ever did this, like, again, the only scope of reference I had to glean anything off of was my own, right? And then the more I did it, the mm-hmm. more I saw people that had issues I had never had. Yeah, right. And I didn't even know people were dealing with
so
this,
important.
And that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of, like, I think it's very common, not common, I think it's very easy, or it's definitely a possibility to forget how much you didn't know, man, right? Mm-hmm. And like one of the hardest things in shooting is you can't see what I see and you can't feel what I feel, yep. right? And so now what I have to do is go home and really, really think about, what do I feel? You know what I mean? Because a lot of dudes, man, like I know a ton of great shooters. And I know a ton of great shooters that I believe are not, they don't know how they do that necessarily. Like they definitely know how they do it, so to speak, right? But they don't necessarily think about the details of how they're doing it because they don't have to, right? Nobody's paying them to teach them how to do it, right? I'm trying to think about like all the different pressure points and all the different things I'm doing. Why does each one of them matter, or is one of them just a byproduct of another one? Like all these different things to try to give you, who may not have ever experienced what right is, right, some idea of what you're looking for here, man. Because like if you ain't never seen a quarter before, and I tell you, go find me a quarter on the street, well, is this it? You know what I mean? Like you don't even know what kind of coin you're looking for, right? Because you ain't never seen this before. And so it's very similar to that, where I'm tasked, or I feel like I'm tasked with trying to conceptualize this in a way that your brain, based on what you have seen as a human being, can understand what we're trying to do here, right? And like, I think if you care enough and if your standard is high enough, that's pretty hard to do, man.
It is very hard.
You know, like think about like
making something that's fairly complex,
a back squat. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty complex motion, man. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't just like, I mean, a lot of people do just throw the bar on their back and go at it, right? But like, explain to me, a person who's never had any conception of having to think about different muscles actuating and feel that and have an awareness of that, how do I do that? And then how do I assess that I'm doing it correctly? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that's hard to do, man.
Like when do I know when I've arrived?
Right.
And then being able to explain that to somebody else is an entirely different skill in and of itself. Just kind of, going through that process of learning. Mm-hmm. In that learning, I think in a class with an instructor is part of the instructor asking you, what did you feel right there? Mm-hmm. And then the instructor being okay with the answer. I don't know. Like, okay, I'm okay with that answer, but let's walk through this problem versus, well, don't do that again. I want you to think like somebody that would think differently. Like, that's basically what you're asking them to do. Like, I want you to do what somebody else would do. Well, but I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
They can't put it together.
One of my favorite parts of class, man, is we work through like, what are we trying to do with the gun? And it can be pistol or rifle, right? And we start to shoot very, very aggressively at distances that most people would never attempt to even shoot at, right? Mm-hmm. Much less aggressively. And what happens eventually, as I'm constantly reminding these dudes of different cues, right? I'm constantly like, they've heard me say the same phrase now 6 times in the past, 5 minutes, right? Because I'm constantly putting that in their head, and all of a sudden it happens, and a dude will be like, "Oh, I felt that," right? And it's like, and I'll always look at them and be like, "What?" And they'll be like, "Oh, I felt myself freaking dig on that thing like real hard," and I'll look at them and I'll be like, "That's freaking great, dude," and they'll be like, "What?" I'm like, dude, most people do that and have no conception that they did it, right? So like the first step in getting better at shooting is first understanding what you're trying to do. Next is understanding what it feels like and looks like to do it right. And then next is having a conscious awareness in real time of when it's not going right so that you can correct it on the fly.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And like most novice level or even intermediate level shooters, when they shoot at a target that they can't see the bullet holes pop up on, they never know what they're going to find until they walk down there, right? Like, I want you to know what right feels like so that out of these 10 shots, you can assess 8 of them were perfect or near perfect, 2 of them went awry.
And this is why.
And then the advanced level is 2 of them went awry because of this, and I know what I need to do. Right, like that's where we're trying to get to, right? Because nobody ever does it perfect or near perfect consistently all the time, right? I think it's completely unreasonable to expect a human being, including but not limited to yourself, to do anything perfectly, right? Like, tell me all about all the things you do that are perfect, right? Yet when we go to the range, we expect perfection, and if we don't, we beat ourselves up about it, right? Now, that ain't your free pass to suck at shooting. That ain't what I said, right? But at the same time, like, and it's against everything in me to say this, but like, sometimes good enough is, man. Like, that's just the way it is, right? And so, excuse me. So you get these dudes out there and they start shooting these things and they'll shoot like 9 rounds that are all like just beautiful. They'll be beautiful.
Okay.
One of them will slip out and all their attention goes to that one, right? And it's like, hey, dude, like, consider this. Like, everybody can tell you all about their worst shooting. They can tell you about that one round, right? I am far more interested in you assessing how you did 90% of them perfectly, right? Because if you can do 9, I know you can do 10. If you can do 10, I bet you can do 11, right? But if all you ever do is put all of your energy and effort into focusing on the one that went wrong, you'll never figure out how you did it right, right? Most people cannot tell you how they do their best shooting. They can only tell you what happens when it goes wrong, right? But what if we could figure out when I do blank, this typically goes good? Well, cool, man. Now you know what you need to do, and I bet you can replicate it, right? But nobody ever pays attention to any of that stuff.
A lot of the way I look at problem solving with shooting is the way I approached my business with fitness, like with personal training or coaching somebody in that sense. And then also part of that was watching, listening to, going and taking courses from, classes from other instructors or other coaches, other industry pros, and seeing other people kind of try to parrot those people. And you could hear it, you could see it. And part of that was always talking about the wrong way. Like, don't do it this way. Don't do it this way. Here's all the wrong things about this. You know, they'll find a video of somebody doing an exercise and they'll spend this whole go through this whole diatribe of all the things that are doing wrong, or go through 10 minutes of telling you how to do it or how the wrong way to do it is, and then show you 2 reps of how to do it right, and they move on. But that person, if I asked you to tell me how to do it right, they couldn't go on for a minute to tell me how to do it right, but they could go to 10 minutes on how it could be done wrong. And a lot of that, I think, comes from, you're trying to tell me about, and go back to the human body for a second, again, the way my brain works. You're trying to tell me about all the dysfunction, all these movement patterns that are dysfunctional is a popular word, right? And you can look at shooting the same way. This is not, there's a malfunction, not in the pistol, but in you in all of these different ways. But you can't explain to me in depth how to do it correctly. And I think that is a very confusing piece for somebody. And that's probably why a guy or, somebody that's got 9 rounds in the A zone, he's got 1 on the Charlie, right? Who's looking at this going, I know exactly what I did right there. That's why this went out here, or whatever. And this is the thing that I'm focused on. But if you go back to tell me what you did with these other 9 shots, they have no freaking clue, because nobody's explained to them and they haven't figured out on their own how to do it the right way the first time. Maybe that's not a good example or a good analogy.
No,
but
I totally get what you're saying.
That's how my brain tries to figure things out.
So I remember my uncle took me out kneeboarding one time, right? And he kept telling me, like, I kept falling off, couldn't get on the freaking thing, right? I was like 13 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. Never went kneeboarding before, right? And he kept being like, oh, no, you didn't get on quick enough. I was like, all right. And then he's like, oh, no, your right knee was in the wrong spot. And I was like, all right. And I just kept trying. And then finally my aunt, she was like, keep your butt down. When you rode it that last time, you had your butt lower. Every time since then, you've been getting up, and it's not working because your center of gravity's not low enough, right? Get your butt down. And I was like, okay, cool. Roger that, right? So I get my butt down. All of a sudden, I'm riding the thing, right? And so the disparity was, he was telling me about why I was failing, but that doesn't give me course correction for what I need to do, man. Like, it's
and it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. Get your butt down.
Yeah.
Let's just start with that and see what happens. Yeah. And then let the person figure it out from there. And then what did you feel that time? Yeah. I kept my butt down and I didn't eat, my eyelids didn't get peeled back. Right? From that water. Yeah, so let's talk about learning stuff and what you've learned since maybe the last time we sat down. I always enjoy my conversations with you about, offline, because you always kind of fill me in on a recent experience that you've had and what you learned, in teaching or in coaching, or what you learned in a match through success and failure and whatever else. I just wonder, in the last, I think we covered the timeline, last 18 months, what are some big light bulb moments maybe you've had, through your journey as both a shooter, but also as a coach?
So so as a coach would be, for the longest time, it was almost like I was not scared, but I was apprehensive about being just brutally honest with a dude, because I thought it was going to make him mad or something. You know what I mean? And so I would with kid gloves try to guide him indirectly into this parking spot I wanted him to arrive at, right? But I think now, especially if you open the class the right way and pour your heart out to these dudes and help them understand what you believe and what you care about and why you're here, speaking for me, it lets everybody kind of let their walls down and let's just have a conversation, man. And it's not emotional, right? It's not ego-based. It's not some arbitrary hierarchy of power or a measure of a man. It's just dudes out here on the range just talking about some stuff, right?
That's a tough order to fill sometimes.
Right. And but I've found that I've actually gotten better at it just by, preface the statement with like something that sounds like, dude, I'm going to tell you this because I genuinely care that you understand it, right? I'm totally fine with you doing this, but I want to make sure you understand the potential detriment of what you're doing because I give a damn, dude. Not because I want you to do it my way. I just want you to understand that what you are doing is very, very rare to be successful, right? Do you understand what I'm saying, right? And then stuff like that. And then that conversation can kind of go a little deeper because I think when you're sincere and you're genuine, like people can smell that, right? Like, and I think that allows them to be now inquisitive as opposed to defensive.
100%.
If they're doing it for the right reasons, if they give a crap, So I guess from the coaching perspective, I've learned that it's okay to be just honest with a dude, man. But be honest, like tell him all of it. Here's the problem. Here's why. And here's why I care about you. You know what I mean? Like that last part's the most important part. It's not because I want to win this conversation, right? It's because I truly do want you to get your money's worth, and I want to do my job to make sure you completely understand this and don't walk off with me being afraid to give you information that I believe you need. That's a pretty big one. From the shooting side, man, it's not shameful to say. I just kind of feel stupid. Like I hate when I learn lessons I already knew. You know what I mean?
Elaborate on that one.
Yeah. So I know with my whole heart that building, protecting, and developing the self-image is the only way to access subconscious skill on demand. Right. And I know that because I've proven it to myself over and over and over again by doing different stuff. Right. And for the last, 6 months or so, I have I've walked away from protecting and building self-image, right? I've just done the thing and kind of got wrapped into this new trendy thing where it's like it's becoming popular to like talk horrible about yourself. Right? Like I hate myself when I leave the range. I want to kill myself. Like that's the implication.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? And
I do not deserve to have a gun.
Yeah, and like and unintentionally, like I started having facets of that were coming into my head, that I was saying to people like my mates that I shoot with and people that I hang out with,
I suck.
Yeah, like that kind of idea started to come in, man. And then like, damn if the old truth didn't come to fruition that if you don't believe you can do it, you're right.
Yep. Believe you can or you can't, you're right.
And so what I have relearned again since I met you is if I want to be the best I can be today, I need to take very, very good care to have goal setting done properly, a practice schedule done properly, a range session done properly, and be very, very careful what I speak, write, and think when I'm talking about me, right? And that has I've changed that intentionally, deliberately changed. Like I've been thinking about it for a while, but I intentionally, deliberately changed it about 3 months ago, and I'm already reaping benefits from it, man. And I really do and I'll preach this until I find out I'm wrong or until I die. The vast majority of above average shooters do not have a technical skill problem, dude. They have a mental problem.
Self-confidence.
It's a self-image problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's the same thing that I struggled with for the longest time and finally overcame. So here's a great analogy for it, man. And Steve Anderson asked me this one time on the phone, right? And this was when I was like, dang, like I can't argue that. And this is not a rhetorical question, nor is it, something that you have to have a defined answer for. But like when I say this, there's an arbitrary number that's going to pop into people's heads, right? What percentage of your on-demand performance is mental, right? And just think about whatever comes to your mind, right? For most people, you're going to hear something like 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe even 99, whatever. Mm-hmm. The next question is, are you devoting that percentage of time, money, and resources to developing that side? Right? And if the answer is no, dude, we call that shit a clue, right? That's what's going on. You don't need more one reload ones, man. You need to change the way you're practicing, change the way you're going about this stuff, and stop focusing every ounce of energy you have on the bad stuff. You know what I mean? But then that leads into, well, okay, so how do I do that?
I was just going to say, where does this show up for you?
So I'm number one is a practice schedule, man. I'm very intentional about meeting or exceeding a written practice schedule, right? And I do that for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is, you think about like a lot of dudes, it's very common, guys will come to class having never experienced this type of training before, right? And get very excited about the gains they get and the future, right? They get really excited. I'm gonna dry fire all the time. You know, they get all tuned up about it. Well, dude, like if you never have dry fired before in your life, right? And you tell me I'm going to dry fire for 3 hours a day, every day. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not going to do that.
Again,
right?
I can relate to this.
Right. And so what's going to happen is you got a match on Saturday, right? And you say, I'm going to dry fire for an hour a day, every day leading up to that match.
And you do that.
Well, let's just say Monday, right? Dog had to go to the vet. Wife couldn't take it, so you couldn't do it then, right? Okay, cool. So you got it in on Tuesday. But then Wednesday, Mama couldn't keep the kids that day, so you had to end up getting the kids from school. So you couldn't do it that day. Plans didn't go as planned, right? Thursday, we ended up having to have the plumber out, man. Toilet stop. Like all these things happen where that didn't happen, right? What does that do for your confidence on Saturday morning when you show up to the match, man?
Right? Do you throw up your hands?
Right. And so does that increase or decrease
your level of confidence?
Your level of confidence, right? But if you're very reasonable about it, right? I'm going to dry fire for 3 to 5 minutes, 2 days this week, right? But then on Tuesday, toilets work fine. You didn't have to call a plumber, so you ever get an extra day in, right? On Wednesday, you decided to just relax, take a break. Everything was good, right? On Thursday, you didn't plan to dry fire, but the wife said, you know what? I'm going to run and get the kids. We'll be home about an hour, right? Got another way. And so now I've exceeded what I said I would do. What does that do for your confidence on match day, right? So like little things like that people never really think about. There's all kinds of different ways that you are indirectly tearing down the confidence you have in your ability to perform, right? And you don't even realize you're doing it, right? Going out to the range and having unreasonable expectations, right? So I watched a bunch of Instagram videos. I'm going to go out and try to do what this random person I don't even know. I don't know the context. I don't even know the conditions. I don't know anything. I'm going to try to recreate what he did. Well, okay, you can't. So now what, right? Number one, you need to recognize that almost every shooting video you ever see was the best thing that happened that day, right? Everything else was worse than that.
It's the highlight reel.
You know what I mean? Also, you need to understand that like as long as you are striving to compete with someone else all the time, you'll never be able to compete with you and look at a brutally honest picture of who am I, man? Like, what can I actually do? So what most people do drives me absolutely banana sandwich, man. Get me just an arbitrary thing. Get me a reload time. What is your one reload 5 yards away? You can hit anywhere on the USPSA silhouette. Just get me a time. Dude, I watch dudes do 22 reloads where they crash and burn, right? And they can't get the mag in the gun. They're throwing mags across the range. They're doing all this kind of mess. And then finally they get one that sticks at like a 1.2 and they're like, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, is that real? You know what I mean? Like, is that your 9 out of 10? Because at the match, you're going to be tested on your 90%, right? Or do I need to be reasonable and say, okay, let me be honest and uncaring about results and outcomes and just truly get an intrinsic look at what is my 90%? Like, what is my 9 out of 10? My 9 out of 10? Because until you find what that is, it's very hard to move the needle on it, man, because you don't even know what you're looking at. You don't know how to look at the data. You know what I mean? Because you've never been honest with what you can actually do. You try it. If it don't work, you don't pay any attention to why it didn't work. Or if it does work, you don't pay attention to why it went right. You just tape it up and try again. Tape it up and try again. Tape it up and try again. And then eventually something sticks.
Try harder.
And you walk off and act like you did something. Right? Dude, 9 out of 10 is the standard. If you can't do it 9 out of 10 times, player, you can't do it. That just is what it is, right? But I think that social media, while it is good in most or some aspects, it's led people to have this imaginary fantasy that these dudes they wish they could shoot like on the internet that they've never actually been on a range with before never mess up. And so they are looking to try to replicate that in an environment where they never fail at it.
It's not
right?
It's not
dude, it's completely unrealistic, right? Like I've had the great fortune, right, to shoot with some of the greatest shooters in our generation, right? The J.J. Rakazas, the Bobby Vogels, the Pressbergs, like all the Joe Farewell, Nick Young, Dan Horner. So like all of those dudes that I've had the privilege to shoot with, man, I seen all of them goof up, man. Like I've seen all of them miss. I've seen all of them miss reloads. I've seen all of them shoot deltas. Like,
that's reality.
Dude, like it's completely unreasonable, again, to reiterate from earlier, to expect your flawed human self to do machine-like unhuman things, right? Like that's completely unreasonable. So what is the mindset going to the range and the expectation of what you're about to get? And I think instead of going there and saying, today I'm going to try to do, a Blake drill in 2 seconds because I've seen some video of it, is like, just do a Blake drill, right? And be very interested in what is happening, right? And then try to do it faster. And when finally it breaks down and you fail, really, really assess what happened. Like, what you need to do if you're paying attention and you understand what you're trying to do, right? So what happened? And a lot of people misconceptualize that as, I just need to slow down. My mind has always kind of felt like if anyone can do it fast, then slowing down is not a requirement, right? Like if any human being can do it fast, then slowing down is not required.
So what is it?
Right. And so like one of the things I freaking hate, man, is when a dude walks up to a guy, smacks him on the back, and he's like, just slow down, brother. Slowing down is not a job description that solves this man's problems. And I've seen a whole lot of people miss real damn slow, man. You know what I mean? So it's not that you need to slow down. You need to do it right. You didn't do it right. So, okay, so then what right? Did you do? Yeah, and like looking at it from a very interested perspective instead of a very critical one. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I actually make the slip up on the range often, and I say, I want you to be very critical of these hits, but critical has a negative connotation attached to it. So like instead of that, I want to change that to be very interested in this, right? Like be inquisitive as to what happened, right? Instead of just saying and acknowledging this result happened, let me try again. Well, why? What happened? Right.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at how adults learn, I think it's important to understand that part of the psyche. And that's what you're going, when the word this was tying into, your psyche and going into your practice, right? Which ties back to having a very deliberate practice schedule.
Right. And it's very, very important that you create an environment where when you touch the gun, it is a positive connotation, right? Good things happen when I do this, right? I believe that the way that you leave the range is typically the way you will come back to it, right? So if you leave pissed off, frustrated, defeated, and failed,
that's the mindset.
You're not real excited about the next time, man. And what happens is that becomes a pattern of your existence, man, and you begin to expect it, right? And when you begin to expect it, that's bad. We don't want that, right? So in the way, like, and people don't understand. In full disclosure, man, like believe it or not, right? Probably going to surprise you. I don't have a master's degree in education or psychology, right? Like,
really?
I know. Shocking. This is just like, none of this are, I guess technically these are my original thoughts, but none of these are my original, epiphany.
It's not
right?
novel,
Like this is from a whole bunch of stuff that's been put into me and the oven was set to a certain temperature and this is what comes out of it. You know what I mean? But like people are not aware of how detrimental their thoughts are, right? So a great example is when you get up to a shooting box at a match and you see that like the majority of targets in this particular stage are covered in no-shoots, right? Most people's brains go immediately into, all right, don't hit the no-shoot. Don't shoot. Oh God, we got to make sure not to shoot the no-shoot, right? I don't want to say never is a strong word. I really, really make a solid effort to not talk about what I don't want. I want to focus on what I do want, right? I want to think about what I want to do, not what I don't want to do, because the power in that is the visualization piece, right? The subconscious mind doesn't it isn't able to differentiate imagined reality from actual reality. All it knows is the visualizations, the images, and the connotations that are put into it, right? Or not even the connotations. Like, it also can't differentiate between like equal and opposite words and negative, positive, good, bad, can't do. Like, it doesn't know any of that. All it knows is what you feed it, and its attempt is to put that back out, right? And so when you say something that sounds like "don't shoot the no shoot," what you see is a visualization of yourself shooting the no shoot, right? And so, like, dude, people will typically speak the future to you if you know how to translate it, right? The dude that is the most nervous is the dude that talks the most, almost always, right? The dude that won't shut up about what he hopes don't happen is scared to death it's going to happen, right? And you listen to him, and if it's like, it's almost like a Freudian slip, right? Like, it just constantly comes out, whatever he doesn't want to do. Like, and I hope I don't shoot that no shoot. Every single time I come out here, I shoot them no shoots. If I can figure out how to not shoot no shoots, I do. Like, dude, I bet you $100 he's about to shoot a no shoot. And I mean that, like, because I've seen that happen so many times. Like, that's what happens, right? As opposed to a dude like Danny Horner, Joe Farewell, right? Like, dudes that are competing at a high level consistently, they don't get in the box and hope things don't happen. They know what is about to happen, right? And that's powerful, man. You know what I mean? And so how do they know what's about to happen? Because they understand and they've created environments where they win, right? And so guess what this is probably going to turn out to be? It's probably going to be pretty good because it always is, right? And that's the piece that I think keep dudes at A class, M class, like, they can't figure out how to break into that next level, right? And you know, what a novel idea, right? But like, one reload ones probably ain't it, man.
Yeah, it's there's a limitation there that what I hear you saying is there's a limitation there, and it's the limitation that you placed on yourself, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And I'm going to try really hard not to mess this little quote up that was shared with me the other day by Cece, actually. And I think it goes like this. If you're not being successful, if you're failing, then you likely lack education. And if you have education and you're still failing, then you're likely lacking in execution. And if you're executing and you have that knowledge and you're still not being successful, then what's likely is that you are poorly planned. And so if I take what you just told me there and I kind of whirl it around in my hamster wheel, and that's pretty much all that's up there, I think about this just with regard to putting the practice together. And when people go out and they're trying to do what somebody else does, which is kind of where this started in what they've done in their highlight reel, you have zero understanding of how they got to that in the first place, yet you're trying to execute something that you don't have any knowledge of, right? And you're doing it probably based on what you saw them do on the range, which then relates back to you don't have a plan here. You just went out to try to do the thing without understanding all the things that it takes to actually do that thing. And we were talking earlier about people want to do cool stuff that they see other people doing, but they lack that fundamental understanding of what it takes to do the basic things in order to do that thing. And that might be talking in circles a little bit.
No, I get what you're doing.
But I think, like, when you look at how to practice and you talk about your practice schedule, and you did a really good job there, I think, with like, hey, let's set a realistic expectation. That sounds totally reasonable, right? And I think if anybody backed up from this and just thought about it, they'd be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. How are you putting your practice schedule together? And I asked the question, like, where does this show up for you? But in putting the practice schedule together, first it's setting a very realistic expectation and understanding what you're supposed to do in order to do that thing, and not trying to pile too many things on to that thing.
Well, and then the other side of it is like, people have to have a disconnect between training and practice and performance.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
They're vastly different things.
They're all different things.
And I think if a lot of people are honest and they know what they're talking about, the vast majority of their range sessions, they're attempting to perform, right? And that's not how you get better at shooting, man. So like, one of the things I told these coppers on day one, man, I'm gonna do something for you that might not have ever been done, right? We are out here training, and I think in training, to get better at anything that is a human performance sport, failure is going to be a requirement.
Yep.
Right? We're going to have to, right? Therefore, I'm going to give you permission to miss, right? And I know for some of you that may be a foreign concept, right? But there's a caveat to it. You can't just miss and just tape it up and try again, right? I'm going to give you permission to miss, but only in the name of exploration, right? Only in the name of being interested in what is happening, right? Like, and I use the gym a lot as an analogous thing, because like most dudes that show up to my class have at least been in a gym working out at some point in their life, right? And so I want to deadlift 500 pounds. Okay, so what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to go to the go to the gym, and I'm going to deadlift 95 pounds a whole lot, and eventually I'm going to get there, right? And everybody would be like, no, dude, right?
That makes perfect sense.
But that is exactly how a whole lot of people are treating their training, dude. Yep. They're going to the range and they're doing what they already know they can do, right? And if you're only doing what you already know you can do, how will you ever get better at that? And like that brings up another thought that like when people are like, oh, just rep the fundamentals, brother, speed will come, right? Well, how exactly will speed come, right? And like when is there an expectation of a timeline on this? Like when does speed come? Like does it come like is like UPS 2-day air, or like where is it like ground, or like when does speed come? It doesn't, man. You have to go get it, right? And in order to go get it, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're going to have to let accuracy take a back seat to go try to lift some weights you ain't never lifted before, man. But rest assured, when it comes time to perform, you still have that same accuracy on tap if that is what you prioritize, right? Like it doesn't just go away and you just don't know how to do it anymore. You know what I mean? And that's another reason why I think dry fire is so important, right? Is because dry fire removes the consequence of failure.
It'll solve a lot of that,
right?
Yep.
So like dry fire is a very different mental thing, right? So number one, just the mental side of we're taking away the explosion, we're taking away the noise, and you can see and assess things a little bit differently when we remove those things. The second part is building and protecting the self-image, right? So when we screw something up in dry fire, very rarely do we feel real bad about it, right? We just try it again. It's no big deal, right? But when you see that delta show up on a target, like that stings a little bit, man. Like that feels some kind of way, right? So if we're going to try to do something new, and bullets are not required to come out of the gun to do it, such as reloads, draws, transitions, movement, like anything that's not like a bullet hitting a target is not a requirement to get better at this, then why don't we look at creating an environment where we can build and protect self-image, man? Right? Where like, okay, we have a reasonable expectation. We're going to try to do something we cannot already do. Therefore, it is highly unlikely it's going to go perfect, right? Cool. Okay, next, let's do it in such a way where there is not a negative result or outcome that gets printed in front of our face.
Right.
Right? And like, and just thinking about stuff like on that level, I think would change a lot. Like, I think it would change everything for a lot of people, man. Being intentional about how you're doing this instead of just saying, oh, well, wife says I can go to the range after work. I got 500 rounds. I'm just going to go shoot a B8 at 20 yards so I'm out of bullets. Well,
and expecting to get better.
Right, man. Like, okay. And I ain't a B8 hater, by the way. That wasn't the intention. That's always weird too, right? People are like, oh,
it's funny you have to say that.
B8s make you slow. Well, then shoot it faster, player.
It's funny you have to say that.
Oh, dang. That sucks. You know, so anyway, just are you actually training anything, or are you just doing something? You know what I mean? And I'll tell you this, man. Like sometimes, like I go to the range, and I'm just not mentally there. Like I'm just like the same way you go to the gym, and you're just not. I'm really glad
you're using that analogy. You know, that like, one I can relate to.
Yeah, like you're just not there, dude. I'll go home. Like there's nothing productive going to happen right now, man. Like all I'm going to do is create an environment where I feel bad. Right? I feel bad about myself. I feel like a failure. I feel like a lazy hind end. This sucks, right? Or I can just be like, man, today just ain't working out. I'm gonna try it again. Or maybe instead of shooting the gun, I'm gonna dry fire the gun a little bit, you know, or change something. You know what I mean?
That's a big one. I think it's just change it up and not being afraid to do that.
Yeah.
But I love that you use the deadlift as an analogy there, because I think most people, as you just, you know,
everybody's tried to pull that bar, man.
Everybody's tried it, right? And so, you know, the lifting 95 pounds a lot and thinking you're going to get to 500 pounds sounds absolutely ridiculous. I think that's a math problem, right? But within the math problem, exists a lot of variables. And the understanding of those variables is extremely important, but the mindset within the variables is also important. And again, in the deadlift analogy, there is, you start with the 95 pounds and you do that a lot of times until it's not challenging anymore. And in order to progress, you are going to have to overload this. And when you overload it, you should expect that the great form that you were able to do at 95 pounds could be compromised. But you have to have some level of confidence. Number one, you can't just go in there and put 500 pounds on the bar and expect you're going to be able to lift it. One, because you're probably not going to be able to. But two, there's risk in that in terms of maybe an injury. And that's very real. You can measure that like right now. And now you're debilitated and now you can't do it at all. But my point of this is there's things that we put into this, like, okay, so I put a little bit more weight on the bar and I noticed my form or my mechanics start to look a little different. Why? Maybe there's weakness in there. Maybe it's a mental thing, right? Maybe I'm fixated on the extra weight that I put on the bar instead of how to lift that extra weight off the ground, right? So there's that variable. So that's an intensity variable that comes along with the mindset. Then there's how many times do I actually do that with maybe some poor mechanics in an effort to try to fix the mechanics while I'm doing that, if that makes sense. So I've just put another 25 pounds on the bar. Okay, I'm okay giving up a little bit of mechanics here so that I can learn how to work the mechanics the right way with this extra weight. And sometimes that means like, okay, maybe 25 pounds is a little much. I've recognized I pushed a little bit beyond my limit here, and I understand that. Let me back it off, not back down to 95. But, 25 pounds down, maybe I take it back down, 10 pounds off of that. Now I see myself doing that. I recognize I can do this. I just have to think about it a little bit differently. And I need more reps at this particular thing. And I add that on over time. So I think, I don't want to beat that up too much. And just that if people approach their shooting program the same way they approach their fitness program, and I mean, in a calculated and smart kind of way, they would see similar results in terms of the progression of what it is they're trying to get accomplished rather than expecting that they should be able to do this with really putting no real work into it at all.
So another really cool thing or really interesting thing or really important thing that based on what you just said, I think needs to be talked about is there are very likely a large amount of your podcast audience that just heard what you said. Dude, like, I don't know about the human body and working out with the level of knowledge you do. All that stuff you just said, like, that's not in me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know all that. But I just had an increase in knowledge based on what you just said. However, here I sit no stronger for receiving it.
Yep.
Right?
You got to go try it.
And so I think a lot of dudes too are misconstruing what large part of shooting is truly human performance, man. So
100%.
The training industry, what I found, right, the more I get into this, it's like, number one, like, it's a business, right? And in order to be successful at any business where you're trying to sell a product, you have to market, right? You have to. And so I think I'm seeing a lot of students that have been led astray by the marketing of this industry where they have this idea that if only I had the right piece of gear, the right information, the right knowledge, all my problems would go away. So I took this class and I still look the same. So I guess maybe it's somebody else and I'm going to go to them and I'm going to go to them. And I'm not saying don't train if that's your hobby or anything like that. I'm just saying understand, man, that like in the same manner, I can know everything there is to know about the anatomy of the human body and how to get stronger. I still got to work out, dude. Right? And so I'll see, it always happens organically. I wait on it. It's one of my favorite parts of class, right? We'll get to a point where dudes are like, I'm giving them the answers, right? When this happens on a target, I'm certain what you are doing, right? And they'll come up to me and they'll be like, all right, Mark, you said, so like low left hits for a right-handed shooter with a pistol, that is almost certainly the firing appendage pushing the gun, right? There is no amount of support hand pressure you can apply to stop that from happening, right? And because a lot of people are like, well, this little finger can't overpower this whole hand. Well, I agree, Lenny. That is a true statement, right? But what can overpower this whole hand is this whole other hand, right? And that's what's happening. So almost certainly subsequent shots. Very rarely shot one, but the subsequent shots were driving the gun back down, trying to put it back. And they'll say, you said that was that. And I'll be like, that's correct. And they'll be like, okay, so that's the fire in hand. That is correct. Okay, so how do I not do that? Well, what they're looking for is what they've been marketed, right? Give me the technique I need, right? Or the mechanic I need. Or the right, what do I need to do? What they've just asked me is very akin to, daddy, I keep falling off the bicycle. How do I ride it?
Oh, man.
Right? And so what is the answer, dude? Get back on it and try again. You know what I mean? And I think that's the hard truth that dudes that are selling training, if they understand it and they know that, they don't want to say that because they feel like it's going to crumble their business model, right?
Oh, man.
But like, and it's, dude, like my business model is very strange, right? In no way, shape, or form do I intend to create an environment where you feel great about yourself, right? Like I'm going to definitely talk to you about promoting and building the self-image and being reasonable and things like that. But I'm not going to create an environment for you where you leave feeling like John Wick because it's not real, right? If I'm anything other than totally honest with you based on my understanding of this, I'm stealing your money. And I'm not doing that, right? And so I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I have the answer that solves your shooting problems and you'll leave out of here a whole different man. That's not going to happen. Now, the other thing I hate is when dudes be like, now listen, y'all, you're not going to get any better at this class. Well, what the hell to sign up for then, man? You know what I mean? Like, you absolutely should see some incremental improvements in certain aspects, right? But you need to understand that in order to get stronger, you got to work out, man.
You got to keep doing it.
You got to work out. Like, I don't know this to be a fact, but I imagine through fixing and adjusting someone's posture, form, and technique, they could lift more weight than if they did it wrong.
Man. Yeah.
But it's not going to be some demonstrable double the weight magnificent gain, correct?
Correct.
Right. And so in the same, it's very, very similar, dude. And for a lot of dudes, like if you don't work out and you don't know dick all about shooting, right? Maybe jujitsu, for instance, right? Here's what I'm gonna do, man. I'm gonna watch all the YouTube videos, read all the books, and go to all the seminars. I'm gonna be black belt, right? Hell no, that's completely ridiculous. Yet that's how we treat shooting, right? I just need the right info, right? Give me the answers. But dude, the answers are on the range.
Or in the dry fire.
And that's the hard truth, man. Like I can't fix this for you. I can just show you how you can fix it. You know what I mean? There's nothing I can do. Like one of the most brutally honest yet beneficial things that was ever said to me or that I've ever heard is the results you're not getting is directly correlated to the work you refuse to do. Right? And it is a refusal. It is conscious that you do not prioritize this. And that's okay if you're okay with it. Right? I don't think everybody needs to be who I am. Right? Just like we're talking about the rape detective. I don't think she needs to be who I am. But if you're not where you are and you've been doing what you've been doing for any significant amount of time, the objective data indicates that is not working, man. You got to do something different, right? And I just try to be like one part of a dude's journey that helps him overcome the big moments that helped me, man. That's all it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that fascinates me still about the industry to this day, and it's what makes the thing go round. So I'm not, I'm not shitting on it, but I would say this, since you've indulged me on the sort of the fitness analogies, and we've been talking about this deadlift. There are things that you could do that may change the way you're able to do the thing, but it still hasn't made you any stronger. And it hasn't made you any more skilled at the thing that you're trying to do. That is the deadlift that we're talking about. And so it doesn't really make any difference whether I have a $2,000 Eleiko bar, and those people
I don't even know what the hell that is.
Right? Or an Eleiko plates, or a basic bar I bought at Big Five with standard plates. A deadlift is a deadlift, right? So I don't care what what piece of equipment you have in your hand. There are still fundamental things you have to do in order to be able to do that thing well.
So I can't buy a Staccato and do it great, maybe?
So this is my point, right?
No offense, Staccato.
Or the dot that you put on there, or the shoes that you wear. So I could go get a pair of shoes, lifting platform shoes, for like Olympic lifting, that would give me a bit of a heel lift that would change then the angle at my ankle, that would then change the angle or that I need to achieve at my knee and maybe my hips and maybe through my thoracic spine in order to put me in a position that could put me at a slight advantage, but it hasn't made me any stronger to do that lift. It just put me in the deficiency may have been at the ankle. You need to work on your ankle mobility, right? So that you can get over that bar in the proper position in order to pull it. So I'll stop at that. But you just proved, or you just answered the question with that I'm trying to, or the point I'm trying to make here, which is, go and get the Staccato or the Atlas or whatever the fuck. Look, those are great pieces of equipment. And there are certain advantages that you may be able to
100%.
get there. But if you still suck at shooting, you're still going to suck at shooting, right? You will quickly reach your limitation, whether it's right away. You may see like, okay, man, I can do a little bit more. I can go a little faster because I have this certain piece of equipment, this $8,000 handgun I have in my hand once I've strapped that optic to it. But it hasn't changed. It hasn't made you any better.
And dude, I want to make sure to say I'm not saying this from a position of pride. I'm saying this from a position of experience. Like I was that dude, right?
I think we've all been there. At some point.
I know you,
whether
man.
It's cars, it's workouts, or it's fitness, it's guns, it's whatever.
Like if you were a normal brain, normal bodied operating human being, I know you. I was you, right? And I know what you're thinking potentially sometimes, right? And I know what you're expecting potentially sometimes. And all I'm doing is, as a dude that has devoted significantly more time than most to understanding this, is trying to give you a little bit of understanding as to why that's not going to work. And I believe you're wasting your time because I was you, man. Right. And it really does matter to me, man. Like I don't even really, I've never sat around and really thought about why I care so much. Right. Like I don't know necessarily just off the top of my head why, but something in me really, really craves that you understand what I'm saying, man, and that you understand what we're doing, and that you understand how we did this instead of just do what I told you to do. Nope, screwed it up, do it again. Nope, screwed it up, do it again, right? And I think, going back to the very beginning of this, when you talk about the institutionalization of certain training, right? Like that's what it's classically been, and I think that's why they have classically looked the same for years. It hasn't gotten better. Yeah. Years. You know what I mean? And it never will. And nobody ever sits back and says, what are we doing?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think a big part of that is the scope of reference, right? They don't know. I was talking to a dude about this. This is a very interesting thing the other day, right? Like, why do cops, for instance, not seek out higher levels of skill, right? Higher levels of training, higher, like outside of department mandated stuff. Well, consider this, man. Again, it's all based on scope of reference and your experience and looking at the world through your eyes and then trying to see that through somebody else's. You ask any child in America, who's the best shooters in the world, right? They're going to answer cops and army men, right? Because that's what the media and the culture and everything teaches you from a very young age, right? And if you grow up with no shooters in the home, no firearms, no nothing, that's what you believe, right? Then one day that child decides, I want to be a cop. Right. And so already they are under the assumption they are going to learn how to be that. Right. So they go to the place where these people are made and formed and molded and created. Right. And they go through all the processes. And then this dude that has been given the authority to say it stamps the paper and says, you've arrived. Right. And so now how would they know there's more? Right? Like they've never done what we've done. They don't know who we know. They've never seen what we've seen, right? And so now if all they ever do is exist inside those walls and measure themselves based on the people that are inside those walls, once you reach a level where you are one of the best within that group of people, dude, who's better than you? You know what I mean? And what are you going to do? Go ask some dude that used to be a plumber that shoots a match?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he don't know. He don't do what we do, man. He ain't in the street like that. And that's, I'm not giving them an out, man. I'm not giving them like an excuse, but I am giving them some empathy, dude. Like I understand how you can arrive there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. And I think there's something else to consider or something to think about, as that person that may be very critical of law enforcement shooting ability. Oh, here come the bugs that we were talking about earlier, man.
I feel at home.
They'll find the lights here in a second. And that is this. Imagine that same person that's gone through that whole life journey and they got that stamp of approval. And then one day, gets convinced or gets pressured or whatever, or gets voluntold that they need to go to this outside training, this other training where things are going to be introduced that they didn't even know were possible. And they're maybe standing on the line with somebody that never got that stamp of approval, but has done a lot of work. And they got this knowledge and they practiced and they did those things, and they have no idea who this person is. They just know we are different. We are not the same.
Yeah.
We are not the same. And that person standing next to him, that civilian or whoever it happens to be, is burning it down. How terrifying that must be to have to come to that realization that all the things I believe to be true are not.
One of the hardest shells to crack, dude, are the old heads that come to class, right? The dudes that they've been in the career of 20 years, right? And they're at this class now, and it's the first time they've ever been anything like this. And like, again, I just have a little bit of empathy for those dudes because they're potentially standing there going through the thought process of everything I've ever thought I knew is not real. And so now I have a decision to make. Do I, at the end of my career, where I ain't got a whole lot of time left anyway, do I choose to burn the house down and rebuild it? Or does my human side want to self-justify why it's okay?
And just hold on tight.
And when you kind of understand all the different layers of this, man, it does really lead you to a point of understanding of how you think, man. I really do get it. You know what I mean? I think I do anyway, right? But I didn't always, right? Like I was one of those dudes. Like full disclosure, I'll be vulnerable, man. Like I was one of those dudes. It was a cop suck at shooting. A plumber shouldn't be able to outshoot a cop. Well, that's not fair, dude. That's not fair to say, right? Because you know what I did when I got off work? I shot guns, right? That's my only hobby I've ever really had. It's all I cared about, right? Do you think that a cop that wears a freaking gun belt for 10 hours a day wants to get home and dry fire? No.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And then also like I'm like a C-class handcuffer. You know what I mean? Like I ain't got to be good at all those other things.
Yeah, there's a pie chart there.
Right. And so like it's again, it's not a free excuse to suck, man. That's not what it is. Like I think that like as a man, as an honorable, integrity-filled American male that is chosen and sworn to his community that you will come and be Batman in the stead of a man that cannot be there for his family, you have a duty to do the best you can, right? Or otherwise don't say it, right? But at the same time, I get it, man.
Yeah.
I get it, right? And that's what I want them to feel when they're out here with me, man. It's like it's okay to be who you are, dude. That's fine. I'm not clowning you. I'm not here to humiliate you, right? I'm just here to maybe potentially like peel back some of these layers and see if I can get you to see something, think about something, or contemplate something you might not have ever thought about. Right. And at the end of the day, dude, if you hate it and you're like, that stupid redneck's full of garbage, I hate everything. Cool. Then do whatever you want to do, man. Right. But just understand that if you do what you've always done, you will look like you've always looked. I guarantee it. Right. Yeah.
That crosses over so many things in life.
Right.
In so many different ways. You know, as I just kind of reflecting back on this conversation as we wrap it up here, and that is some of the bigger takeaways that I'll take from this conversation that I've heard, and I've had this conversation with you before, but this one I'll marinate on. I know this one, I'm a processor, and I'll walk away thinking about this. But some big things that came up for me is how much you do care, and that's okay, and you're perfectly fine with that. You also don't let it eat you up, but it is something that you think about when you're not at work. And I think that is something that I don't know that everybody can relate to, but hopefully they'll think about it a little bit, especially for some of those instructors out there.
Going back to something I heard Pranka say one time, man, recruit, never convert, right? And I really, my heart don't like it, but my brain says it's real, right? Like I really do care, man, but I ain't gonna force you because I know I can't. I can't, like, it's almost like arguing with nutcases on the internet that think that we should go to socialism. You're not going to win that argument, man. Like, there's nothing you're going to say that's going to win it because they don't want to be you, right? And so in the same way, like, when you've got a bunch of dudes that are just lackadaisical in nature about everything, they're mediocre in everything, they're lazy in everything.
Why would you expect
you are not going to talk them into feeling the way you feel about this, man, right? But what I am going to do is I'm going to get better and better and better and better and better. And if you would like to come and be a part of this culture, come on in, man. Right. And that's the best I can do. Right. I don't like it. I wish I could make you feel the way I feel about it. But the realization is I know I can't, man. And so I'm going to give you what I got. if it tastes good, you dig it, cool, man. If you thought that steak was terrible, then here's your money back, dude. Maybe it ain't for you.
Yeah.
You know
So
what I mean?
on that same vein of conversion versus recruitment, there's a few things, other things that I'll take away, and that is the statements you were making about being honest, and sometimes what may feel brutal in terms of honesty to somebody. I truly believe, and I've always believed this, that people want to be pushed. They do. They don't always know how to do that for themselves, but they want to be pushed. And so pushing them means being honest and giving them the real news, not the sugar-coated news. But there is a way to do that in a way that doesn't make them feel like an idiot, and drive them further into that level of retraction where they will self-justify not being good or not wanting to practice. So that's another thing that I'll take away from this, kind of thinking about how I watch other instructors interact and sort of give their information. And then I think also on that is part of giving them that honesty. There's also a little bit of that, what you said was you're giving them permission to miss, right? And that is like, as I'm pushing you, I want you to understand, I know this is going to be hard for you, and it's okay that it's hard. And it's okay that you're not going to be good at this right now. But if you stick with me here, I'm going to show you, or at least I'm going to attempt to show you that you can and you will get better if you do these things.
Right, dude. And like what we're getting ready to do is not the measure of a man. It's not
100%.
like we're not going to make you take a Facebook profile picture beside this target, dude. Like it's not who you are. We're trying to do something we can't do. We got to be reasonable about it. And then going back to what you were talking about being honest with people, I tell you where the catalyst was that kind of pushed me over that ledge was I thought about how I treat my children, right? and like I am always brutally honest with my boy, right? And it's not that I don't care about his emotions or how he feels about it. It's that I care more about him than I do about how he feels about me.
Right.
And I like there's no other, like I can either let him go down the road of being a garbage human being because I'm afraid he might not like me, or I can tell him the truth. Right. Why? Because I love him, dude.
Right.
And I care about him. Right. You know what I mean? And I wish people weren't so emotional these days, man. I wish people that weren't like. I think social media has done that. I think the culture that we've created has done that. People are kind of taught that like you should be mad about something. You know what I mean? And if somebody steps to you, you should get all upset about it. Like it's almost expected. And if you don't, you're a pansy. It's weird. Like, and we've lost the ability to communicate in a civil discourse and be interested about a topic where we might end up disagreeing, man.
It's okay.
And it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's like, as of right now, I'm sitting here trying to think. I'm thinking about Ollie from class, right? Ollie really likes that 226 SIG that he shoots. I think that's like, I hate that gun. I hate it, right? I also did not take notice of what kind of shoes Ollie was wearing today, right? But I bet you, whatever kind of shoes he's wearing, I probably don't want them, right? I probably ain't interested.
Different strokes, huh?
But regardless of what kind of shoes he's wearing or not, that's still my friend, dude, and I still like that dude. And I bet you he's got a pretty good reason for buying those shoes, right? And so again, it would be very boring if everybody looked the same, did the same, thought the same, whatever. And so eventually we're going to find a point where we're not going to think the same about this kind of stuff, dude. And like, it's not emotional for me. Like it's fine. Right. And so I just hope that I can create an environment where dudes believe me when I say that, right? They don't think I'm just saying it, so that when I do tell them what I really think they need to hear, they understand it from a position of, if I can get spiritual for a minute, it's from a position of love, dude. Like the greatest commandment, love God the Father, all your heart, mind, and soul, love your neighbor as yourself is second to that, right? I try to live that, dude. Like I really do mean, like I truly love you as a human being, dude. I care about you. You have value. You're prized, right? I want you to win. I want good dudes to win always, right? And that's why I'm here, right? Like, believe it or not, the training industry is not $1 million moneymaker. You know what I mean? Not for me anyway. And so I'm not doing this for G-Wagons and houseboats.
Really is a labor of love, right?
It is, dude. Yeah. Like I give a crap. And I thought for a long time about like, what if my kid goes out on the streets And all he knows is what he's taught by that red shirt at the academy, man. Like, would that make me feel good? Right? And I can't fix everything, and every problem is not a gun problem, but the gun is my problems that I can fix, right? And so do what you can do, man, and try to help as many people as you can, because you really do, like, that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's child, that's somebody's daddy. I want you to win, man. You know what I mean? If you're going to carry this thing defensively, right? If not, and it's just a hobby for you and you want to exercise your Second Amendment rights, cool, man. Then come let me show you what I know about it. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, dude, like I think all able-bodied American males that possess firearms should strive to be at least somewhat proficient at them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And that's the mindset piece, and the way you explain that was about the coming from the perspective of positivity, and for some people that might sound a little corny, but from it
sounds corny because it's strange.
That's exactly right. And from a scientific perspective, we know that while it might sound strange, what you said is very true. Right. In that if how you approach it and how you leave it is how you're going to come back to it. Mm-hmm. So having that mindset about, it's okay that I suck today, but I don't suck.
Yeah.
Right? I suck today, but I don't suck. And more importantly, I don't want to suck.
Right.
I want to get better. And that brings me to the last point, which is you need to think about how you don't want to suck. More specifically, how do I practice so that I can continue to get better? And people are not organizing themselves in their brain if they can't get to do that right or well. Let's just say, I won't call it right, because I think there's probably many ways to do that. But if they're constantly going in it with this mindset of, I suck, or I need to be as good as this other guy, to me, that's almost the same thing. Because if you're looking at this pro shooter and you're trying to shoot like him, and you have an expectation that you will if you go out to and you just do some random shit on the range, well, that's the same as sucking, because you're not going to be that dude, right? You're not going to be that dude. So right. you have to approach this with the mindset of, I don't want to suck, so I need to get better. How do I do that? That brings you to the practice piece. How do I put the pieces together so that I don't even have to think about sucking? I just think about getting better every time I go out there.
Right.
And what do those pieces look like for me? Not what they look like for the other dude, and not what equipment am I holding in my hands, right? And how is that going to make me better? But with the equipment that I do have, right? And the skill set that I have right now, and the knowledge or the education that I have right now, and how do I execute that in a way, or execute through the things in a way to help me get better? Again, this may be, for some people, it just might be too much, man. It might just be way too much. I like going to the range with my cool gear, with my friends, hanging out, a social thing. And I think you're going back to kind of how some instructors maybe come across out there and how they're putting it out there. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that. Mm-hmm. Like, and I don't mean like they don't get it. They get it, but that's not how their brain works. Like, they would never approach a training or a practice session in that way, where we're just going out to shoot today. Every time they go out, there is purpose for what they're doing, and there's a plan for how they're going to do it. And that is something that I'll have to sit back and think on, like in my own approach to practicing, where I can get better, and how to reapproach my practicing just in general. Because a lot of times I think people go out to courses or classes, and that is their training or their practice, and that's it. And then to your point about the statement, like, coming to my class isn't going to make you a better shooter. Well, it should help you become a better shooter. Mm-hmm. But if this is the only thing you're doing to become a better shooter, well, then don't expect much more than a little bit of maybe education and knowledge that you're going to gain today. You have to go do the thing. You have to work out.
I think the single greatest starting point that I could give people is, instead of "I suck," "this sucks," "this is garbage," or anything like that, change that statement into, what do I need to do? Right? Like, identify your performance in 3 categories: great, okay, or needs work. If it needs work, what is the solution? Identify the solution immediately, right? And then assess, what do I need to do? Right? And like, when you can identify problems, you understand how they came about, and you can identify a solution to them, that feels way more inspiring than, well, I guess I suck.
I'll add one more thing to that, and that is when you were talking about the dry firing 5 days a week for 10
Yeah.
minutes or whatever, and the things that can run into there. In terms of goal setting and expectation setting, to me, that's not a goal.
Mhm.
That's a commitment.
100%.
The goal would be, what do I intend on accomplishing through this, and how do I do that?
Right.
Right? And I think people conflate those two things
Because
quite frequently.
Without a goal, you can't take a metric on whether or not the practice is working.
My point exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, no, that would not be a goal. That would be a commitment to accomplish a goal. And that's the difference between that.
So I think, again, showing up to the range on Saturday, right, to the match on Saturday, having fulfilled your commitment, but without having a goal within that commitment outside of, I'm going to do that thing and expect that when I show up on the range on Saturday, I'm going to be better. That's stinking thinking, man.
Dude, and then one more thing I gotta touch on before we wrap. The application of that, because a lot of coppers might be hearing this right now and be like, well, I don't go to matches on Saturday, you know what I mean? Like, and so they misconceptualize that this might not apply to their world, right?
Take shooting out of it.
Dude, like even if you do lead the shooting in, imagine what it would feel like. Imagine the difference between, I've earned the skill I have, I've shown up, I've done the work, I've met and exceeded a written practice schedule. So this high-risk felony stop I'm doing right now, if it goes lethal, I feel a whole lot better about it. You know what I mean? And like, that's the difference maker, right? Like back in the day, they had that big FBI Miami shootout, right, down in the 80s, when the two dudes, I can't remember what their names were, but they got in a big shootout, killed a bunch of FBI agents, bad day and all this. Well, I think if I'm remembering this right, like the day before, they were pulled over by like a captain or something on just a regular Miami police force, right? And there was a gun in the car, and they did this little back and forth about like, oh, you know, don't touch the gun, and this whole moment's happening right now. And finally, that dude said something like, "Look, man, if you're going to do it, go ahead and get to doing it. I got stuff to do today." Right? And I remember thinking, that is awesome, right? Like that is a part of officer safety, is officer performance and confidence, right? Like, dude, go ahead and tell me what we're doing, because like I'm winning today. So decide.
You're going to make a decision,
I mean?
and then
instead of having the feeling in your heart of like, oh God, oh I hope, oh please don't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't ever want anybody to feel like that, dude. Like, I want you to have confidence in what you're doing, and the only way I know to do that is to feel like you've earned it, right? And so that's what I got.
Man, I love all what you got tonight. I always do, man. And like I said, at risk of overdoing it, and sometimes I do that, but I feel okay about it. And that is just, thanks very much for having me up. Thanks for the dinner.
It,
that was outstanding.
Very welcome, sir.
Yeah, and for the conversation.
I'm always very humbled and flattered that you asked me to talk on your microphone, because, you know, I don't know if you know this or not. You know, like Ron Burgundy said, you're kind of a big deal, right? And so
I don't know about that. But that's weird for me to hear. But
I understand, right? But it's also weird for me to like watch you talk to all of these, like, I'm going to call them iconic people in this industry, right? Like people that I've looked up to, people that I glean wisdom from, right? And then to be asked to sit in that same chair is very, very flattering. So appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks again for your time. I can't wait to see you again soon. You live all the way on the other side of the country, and so it doesn't happen super frequently. But I feel really fortunate. I've had the opportunity to train with you a couple of times this year. Saya at SHOT Show. I know you're going to be back up here in a couple of months.
Next month.
Yeah, pencil me in, man. Pencil me in.
Yeah.
Let's dinner's on me next time.
Okay. Can do.
Appreciate you, brother.
Can do. You too. Thanks, man.